This is the Bottom Shot Podcast.
Pulvereri is up high. They come out of turn number 4. Stutter between the turns. The fans come to their feet.
It is Ted Christopher still in command. Keith Rocco right there on his back bumper.
Bringing Stafford Motor Speedway's past and present together.
They are side by side running for the finish line. It's a photo finish.
Deep into turn number 3. He goes in deeper than most. Christopher is in trouble. It is Keith Rocco to slingshot to the bottom, and he'll take down the win.
A Stafford Motor Speedway production where we will hear from the personalities from the past and present that found success on the legendary half-mile oval.
The scoreboard shows goose eggs as they wait. It's Pulvereri. He wins it by inches over Richie Evans in the Spring Sizzler.
Unbelievable chain of events.
Now, here are your hosts, Paula Root and Kyle Rickey.
Bottom Shot Podcast on the road again, and this time we are in Somerville, Massachusetts, just outside of the great city of Boston, and able to catch up with one of the originators of the Spring Sizzler at the Stafford Motor Speedway some 50 years ago. Hard to believe. Bruce Cohen joins us. Bruce, first off, thanks for hosting us up here. We turned your apartment into a studio here pretty quick.
I think that's terrific. It really is. It's great to see you guys.
Well, Bruce, kind of get us all started. How did you get involved in the sport, and how? We're in Somerville, Massachusetts, and we're talking about the Sizzler.
Well, actually, the most famous race car driver from Somerville, Massachusetts, was Ralph Hepburn, who was born in Massachusetts. He won a AAA championship right before World War II. He raced Indy, and he was killed in 1946 in a Novi.
Wow.
So he's the person who probably came the furthest from Somerville. I grew up in West Roxbury on Temple Street, and right around the corner on Perham Street, there used to be these pink and white race cars, and I'd go by there in my bicycle. I thought these were the coolest things in the world. And as years went on, I found out they were owned by Ed Gendro Sr., who promoted Norwood Arena before NASCAR with Frank Litwin. And Eddie Gendro Jr. For many years sponsored Spencer.
Wow.
Jimmy Spencer.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I was this kid. I see these, oh, wow, these things are really cool. Trains, trucks, and loud cars always interested me. And I could never, we lived probably 5 miles from the Norwood Arena. I could never get there. And we moved to Brookline, and then I got thrown out of Brookline High, which is probably the best thing that ever happened to me. And I went to the new preparatory school for wayward boys in Cambridge. And who did I meet? Butchie Walsh, who became a NEMA champion and raced modifieds, and Phil Sears, who was one of Don McTavish's early buddies and stockholders, and Bob Rifkin, whose father was Marvin Rifkin of M&H Tire.
Wow.
So about the same time, I got my license. And I said, I got to go to Norwood and check this thing out. And I went there, sat up high in the second turn, and I said, this is for me. And so for this fat little Jewish kid from Brookline, I thought this was the coolest thing that ever happened. And I just loved going there on a Saturday night, watching these colorful people and colorful cars do the race. And it was just a magical time.
So it all kind of came together because you got kicked out of Brookline High.
Yes,
You met all those guys.
Yep. It was like landed.
Wow.
It was just terrific.
Wow.
And the first race I got to know, I was a kid, and I was a big goof off in Brookline High, but they had a mechanical aptitude test. And I knew about car parts and pistons and connecting rods, and I scored one of the highest tests in Brookline. And the principal had a meeting, and he said, I can't believe this, but Bruce Cohen set the new pace set the new standard for the mechanical aptitude test. So I was always interested in mechanics, but new prep, running into Butchie Walsh and Skinny Phil Sears and Bobby Rifkin, that was it. And then going to Norwood Arena. And the first driver I asked a question was Rennie Charland.
Wow.
And
He's a pretty good one.
yeah. And he said, I'm not going to tell you my speed secrets, because blah, 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 blah. And then I asked Ernie Gahan, and Ernie would always take the time to answer my seemingly stupid and dumb questions. And over the years, we became very, very good friends. And when Ernie passed, my wife and I give a donation to a humane society up in New Hampshire in his memory. But that's where it started. And then as I got my license, I found Gasoline Alley up in Needham. And Jack Malone was there, and all those. Donnie was right down the street, and Bobby Melnick and all those guys. And it was just like this magnetic attraction for me. And I got to be very good friends with them. And then it was a lot of fun. And I started when I went to Thompson, that was like the ultimate super speedway. Wow, look at this place, And then I started going to Trenton and Langhorne and different places. And it just grew in me. And I won a contest in Speedway News. And then about 64, 65, I was in Old Bridge, New Jersey with Big John Kershaw. And Carl Merrill, who we had the arch enemies for life. And it was great. We had the most honest relationship. He hated me, I hated him. That was fine. And I said to Len Sammons Jr., you wrote your article about Norwood Arena, the feature line. I was like, that's not how it happened. This is what went on. And there's Fats, you can ask Fats. So anyway, Len says, well, why don't you write the column? So I started writing the results, and then I went into a column. Then after a few years, I went with National Speed Sport News. So that's where it really started. And I wrote for Stock Car stuff and Circle Track and Speed Sport News, and I got to be very good friends with Chris Economaki, who was a great guy. Hated to pick up a check, but he was a great guy, and he knew his stuff, and he was really good. And the Sammons family were wonderful, and so it was a lot of fun. And you got to know, it was a great era in racing. You got to know, I kind of grew up with Donnie McTavish and Pete Hamilton and those guys. And it was, the younger crew coming in, and the people and the racing people were so welcoming and just great, great people. A lot of fun to be with. And I got to know Eddie Flemke very well, who's one of my all-time heroes. And if anybody should be in a Hall of Fame because of what he accomplished and what he did and the people he mentored, it should be Eddie, from Denny Zimmerman to Richie Evans and all those guys. And it was a great time to grow up. There was always something doing in Gasoline Alley. And one Christmas Eve, I went up there. I said, I got to see what's going on, if anything. There was Lou Austin working on his modified. And, it was just a lot of fun. And the people were great. And it was a transition era in the 60s. One of the big stories that never has been really written about was when Norwood got rid of the cut-downs and went with NASCAR. That changed the whole complexion of racing around here. It gave birth to Pete and Mac and Bugsy and all those guys. And there was a lot of animosity from the people who stayed at Norwood to the people who left. And the people who left tended to go to Seekonk. Mm-hmm. And there were so much hard feelings in that era. But, when you think about it, Paul, it was such a great era to grow up with. There was always something going on. And the characters that you met, Bugsy and Fats Caruso and people like that, they're not, it's just different.
Explain to us the kind of the difference there between, what are the cut downs?
The cut downs were coupes that were chopped and channeled. They were very low, and they ran everywhere. They went Rustboro, different places, and Norwood. The cut-down drivers went on strike against Norwood, and Norwood retaliated by throwing them out. My good pal Carl Merrill was the leader of the cut-down strike, and then he sold those guys out and went to work for NASCAR in Norwood, which created a lot of animosity. And if you wanted to ever hear animosity, the late Leo Cleary, the way he would tell stories was, a few cuss words here and there. And that changed the complexion. NASCAR came in, and the cut-downs eventually evolved into the supers. And around Boston, Norwood was probably 10 miles from downtown Boston. You had West Peabody. That was about 16 miles from here. There were 4 or 5 tracks in Medford over a period of times. There was the Pines. There was Westboro. There was Hudson. There was Manchester. There was Dover, New Hampshire, which was an interesting track. In the 60s, Charlie Elliott ran it. He was paying $1,000 to win a cut-down feature in the late 50s.
Wow.
And the Bombers, he'd pay $500-600 to win.
Wow.
So that whole NASCAR coming in changed the whole complexion of things around here. And was it a good thing? Some people say yes, some people say no. But it did change things. But it gave rise to, the Bugsies and the Macs and the Pete Hamiltons and that bunch. And it was a good time. It was a lot of fun. And the Sizzler got going, in the late 60s and early 70s, all fall, summer and fall, you'd go into the big races. It was Langhorne, there was Trenton, there was this one, there was that one, this one and that one. And we went to Middletown, and we're coming back. Obviously, it was 71, and I was sleeping in the back. I had this big old Plymouth Fury 3. We called it the limo. And it was a great car. And we're in Waterbury. I'm half sleeping. I said, you know what? I said, what? Lou and Dick were there. I think Don Berrio was there and with us. And I said, you know what? I said, I'm getting sick of all these big races, all concentrated basically in the fall. I said, you know what? Someone ought to have a big money race, a short race in the spring. I said, it would work. Well, that was on a Sunday. It was on a Saturday night or something. It was a holiday the next day. Lou shows up when Dick and I lived in 66 Hall Avenue, down the other end of town. He says, we got to do it. I said, what are we going to do now? He said, we got to promote this race. He said, what race? The race you talked about last night. I said, okay. So we sat down and decided to do it. And we approached Don Honig, who shot it down. And we approached your grandfather, who I never expected would say yes, and he did. And then it went from there. And in the era, there was to do it, we had a lot of great people. Billy Welch, who lived right down the street, Bill Slater, and a guy who's never really gotten the recognition, and I hope he goes to the Sizzler this year, Pete Zanardi did the PR. Mm-hmm. And Peter was very plugged into all the people. And if you think about then, where it has changed, there were a lot of local papers that covered racing. Boston, the Record Herald, the Globe did stuff. Providence, Springfield, Walt Renner, and John Kershaw in Hartford, and Charlie Mitchell down in New Haven area. That's all gone. And for example, I said, we can get a lot of free ink this for doing this, and we did. We took lessons from Russ Conway, going to the local papers, Haverhill, Lawrence Lowell, and stuff like that, and. That's all gone, but that was a big factor, that all this free publicity. And and I remember the late Jim Moffitt said, you guys are completely out to lunch. It'll never work. And I just kind of had an instinct, Daytona works because everyone's frozen all winter. I got to go see a race. And I figured if you can whip up all this interest, I think you'd do all right. And we had a lot of good help. Your grandfather was terrific, by the way. And so we worked on it, and it just people like with the poster. I have an original one up on my racing wall. A lot of people gave us flack. Well, why Don Diffendorf? We liked the car. The car was built in Gloucester. Jimmy Carter built it for Bentley way back before that, and it just worked out. We had a lot of good people, and it was different. Usually the spring, track is opening, might have a big race, but this was let's do a spectacular. And I'm really proud of you and the family for keeping it going. It's kind of something to say, wow, this thing's going 50 years later. And the day itself, the night before, one of our key things is we got to make sure we have the purse money to pay these guys. And I slept in the floor of the Stafford office, the old office, the configuration, with $12,000 odd in a 44. And in the middle of the night, I hear this voice. I said, I know who that is. It was Uncle Jack and his girlfriend at the time. So he's opening the door. I said, you open that door, I'll blow you blankety blank head off. And I hear, oh, no. And I said, hi, Jackie, it's me. Come on in. And we laugh about it to this day. And your uncle says, there are a lot of people wish that you shot me. And so it was quite a day. And, it was cloudy and gloomy on race day. And I'm going, oh, man. And Earl Grant was the flagman, and Earl was a very good friend of mine. And when he gave the halfway sign, I was like, wow, we pulled this thing off.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, I mean, you guys always get rained on. I think you're in a bad mojo down there with the weatherman. But it was quite a day, and the Connecticut State Cop told us, that's it. No more people allowed in this place. We were settling standing room, and I would say we turned away at least 3,000 people.
Wow.
It was like, wow. And we were at 128 cars showed up. I think 120 took time. Entered a race. And the premise was a short race with big money, because frankly, I hate pit stops. I really do. I love sprint cars. 30 laps, get it over, let's go. And I originally wanted to make it 44 laps in honor of Sharky in the 44 from Waterbury. And I got outvoted, and that was fine. So it was 80 laps. And, let's have a quick race, get it, exciting. Mm-hmm. And it worked out. It was really good. And we hustled all kinds of promotions and parts and oil and all kinds of stuff for the races. And it was quite a day. It was one of the biggest days. It was just an incredible day. And I'm glad we did it. And I'm very glad it's still going. But, times have changed. I mean, years ago, you never had a podcast.
I don't think so.
It's
a little different.
You didn't even have cell phones then.
No internet.
No internet.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Things have changed. I don't know if it's for the better. It's certainly different.
Yeah.
And I got to admit, your Uncle Jackie was right. That when he started this TV bit and subscription, I said, Jack, people want to go to war. They want to see the races in person. You're blowing them all that money. Well, it works. And I admit I was wrong. But, I've had a lot of fun in racing. Met a lot of great people. It's been an adventure. It really has. The characters you met, and like Lenny Bolo. Lenny and I were very, very dear friends. In fact, in my draw, many years ago, Lenny and I were somewhere, and he said, let's rip up $1. You take half, I take half. He said, if we ever down and out, we can always go get a coffee. I mean, you couldn't even go in a Starbucks, dunks for that today. I still got it all these years later. And I was his official clothier, and Lenny was a guy who laughed at the world, and I used to get in quite a few arguments. They were friends with your grandfather. About Lenny. Now, Lenny's car was always had the lived in, the raced in look. And I said to your grandpa, I said, Jack, one day come out of your tower, sit in the stands, and when the announcers do the lineup, who gets the biggest response and the biggest cheers? It was the 3-car on Lenny. And he finally admitted I was right. I said, if you had 24-car field, you had 22 cars like that, one great car, you're right. But, I mean, he was the people's choice. And Lenny was a very sharp guy. He and I hoisted a lot of brews down the local tap room from his house, the Beach Bluff Club. And Lenny was an amazing guy. And you meet a lot of guys. For example, a guy who won Jack Malone. Mm-hmm. Jack was Peter Hamilton's mentor, one of them. And they voted in Needham High School, Jack would be the least likely to succeed. By the time he was 30, he was a millionaire in real estate. He still owns half the town. And this kid, he had a good career. Kerry, his son, had a good career. And you meet people like that, and Bugsy. But I mean, Bugsy's so whacked. He's still whacked out.
He came on the podcast, and all I can say is, wow.
Yeah.
We had to. I think we.
He had to bleep it.
We talked for about 2.5 hours, and we could use about 45 minutes of it.
Yeah. But that was Bugsy. He was just. But where he was good? He was good with the kids. He loved the kids.
I mean, to this day, he is probably the all-time most loved driver at Stafford.
Yeah.
The stories are all about the time I met Bugsy.
Oh. Still hear about his fan clubs.
Yes.
I think our Dave Barabolt, who was on our crew, was on it.
Bugsy called me one night when I lived in Hall Avenue. He said, where are you? Oh, I'm sick, Bugsy. I got a cold. Well, we're down the street. He came out. We had more than a few beers. And I had an antique barbecue, which is in the Pro 9 Museum now, that Ernie Gahan and Bugsy passed out. That's the claim in the chair. That's its claim to fame. And Bugsy passed out like, oh. But he was a great, great guy, great race car driver. And, those people were colorful, like Renee Charland and, Fats Caruso and stuff.
Yeah, so let's back up a bit, too, because that was amazing. That was a lot. That was great. But so you got your start kind of as a kid going to the race at Norwood.
Yep.
Explain to our listeners, what was that track like? Because, the vast majority of us never saw the place, but have kind of, heard the stories of Bill Slater there and kind of those
Norwood
guys.
Was about, 10 miles out of downtown, but right on Route 1. It was a track originally built. They were going to race greyhounds there, and they didn't. And it was a quarter mile. It was almost circular, and it had grandstands all the way around the track. Big parking lot. Had a bar downstairs, a fully licensed bar, and it pulled in a lot of people. And it was a tough track to get around. In the early days, Red Cummings, those guys, Leo Cleary had it figured out, and so did Bill Slater. And it was just it was a great track. It was just a racy racetrack. That's kind of weird to say that, but they put on a good show, and the fan, they pulled in a lot of people, and then at the end, they didn't promote it, and they threw out the modifieds in '69, and they brought in the late models, which is kind of like going on after the stripper compared to when you see Bugsy Stevens and all these guys, and then they decided to sell it. So but it was a great place, plenty of parking near Boston, near Providence. The stockholders decided they'd sell it, and they figured, here comes the payday. Well, they owned money to one of the banks. At the auction, the bank bought it, and all they got was their loan abrogated. That was it. They didn't make any money on it. And where they were stupid, in my opinion, they could have kept the track, sold off all the land for industrial site, kept the physical plant, and say, okay, we can run 20 nights a week. And they'd run on a Saturday night when the factories weren't operating. They could have had their cake and eat it, but they didn't see it coming. But it was a very nice racetrack, and I'm still friendly with a lot of the people I met there as a kid. And it's hard to believe that's been gone 50 years now.
Yeah.
But it was a place to see. And what was interesting in the early NASCAR days, Bob Saul, who was the chief, he was NASCAR Eastern rep, he'd deal different people to come up. Eddie Krause would come up. Herbie Tillman came up. And, guys from Jersey, Gil Hearn would come up. But it was kind of cool when they brought them up. And then, we had, the Bill Slaters and the Fats Carusos and the Pete came, Leo Cleary. Leo, I don't know if you knew Leo. Leo was a great guy. Funny as heck, and he had Leo. You talk to drivers. What was your greatest thing? What's the thing you really wanted to do and you couldn't do? What accomplishment did you miss? Well, some people say, well, I wanted to win a national championship. I wanted to win Trenton. I wanted this. Leo said to me, my biggest disappointment. I said, what? He said, I used to race 4 divisions at Norwood before NASCAR. He said, on 2 occasions, I won 3 divisions and finished second in the 4th. He said, I never won 4 divisions in one night. That's what I wanted to do. It wasn't winning at Langhorne. It wasn't, forget all the championships. He won 13 or 14. He won. Leo wanted to win. Leo wanted
4
to win
in one night.
4 in one night. Yeah, and Leo, I miss him. He every so often the phone would ring. Leo would, hey, I'm in Florida, blah, blah, blah. And he loved racing, and he was a critic of it, but he was a student of it. But that's pretty amazing that, I wanted to win 4 in one night. But he had he was an auto body adjuster. When you crashed, he'd come and look at it. And in those days, if you remember the station wagons with the phony wood, it's called Dynock. 3M made it. Well, if your station wagon crashed, it was very difficult to hang it, to put a new one on. He had like 25 body shops who'd call him to hang it. And he would go in and 10 seconds have a perfect job. And Leo was amazing. He was a great craftsman. I mean, he built the M2s and stuff, and Leo was a good guy and stuff. And I'll probably know its most famous graduate was Pete Hamilton. Now, Pete came from an interesting family. Both parents were college professors. And they had a big house on Bound Brook Road, 92 Bound Brook Road in Newton Highlands. And Pete was a very bright guy. He went to U of Maine, U of Maine Zero in Orono, as they call it, and he dropped out after a year. But what he did, he was a very humble guy. He learned from Bobby Melnick. He learned from Bobby Bakioki. He learned from Jack Malone. He was like a sponge. He'd read a lot about physics and stuff. He spent the winter with Eddie Flemke, and Eddie kind of made him, turned him into this, really got him that he understood how race cars worked. And Pete just worked his way up, and he was one of the most interesting, one of the days I'll never forget with Pete. Jack Malone had a donut shop called the Dozen Donuts. It was on top of Gasoline Alley. He had to drive down the alley, and there was a string of garages. So it was in November, and all the usual suspects were in their assigned seats in Jack's donut shop. And it was on a Sunday, and everyone had their seats. And Pete comes up with his pickup. He had a new pickup truck, a black Ford. He had 2 suitcases and a little GE TV, portable TV. So he comes in the door, and Jack Malone, Jack's another, I like us, he's a character. He calls him. We're all sitting there, and Pete comes in, and Jack gets up and says, Goodwill. That was Peter's middle name, Peter Goodwill Hamilton. He said, Goodwill, you take a look at all these ugly mugs sitting down here, and you better remember what they look like, because you're on the way up. And when you're on the way down, you might need them again. So never forget what these people look like. And I will say this about Pete. He made it to the top.
Yeah.
Physical injuries caused him. He hurt his back at Bridgehampton and the Gene White, the Camaro. And so the doctor said to him finally, Peter, you got 2 choices here, pal. We can fuse your neck and you can drive, but you're not going to be able to turn your head, or we just kind of treat it. So Peter kind of gave up the driving. But, the last time I saw Pete was at a Norwood reunion. Well, it was after that somewhere in Gasoline Alley or something. Some place I ran into Pete. And I said, Peter, they did it. He said, what'd they do? I said, the damn town, city of Newton, took down the tree in front of your folks' house where you used to change motors. He said they didn't. He had tears in his eyes. I said, don't even go by there. But that was the type of guy. And when you saw Pete, you'd run into him 3-4 times and you call him. It was, how are you? How's the Bugsy? How's this one? How's that one? How's this one? It was never about him. It was about all the people who helped him on the way up. And that was Peter. And one of the sad things not sad, it was typical of, let's say, the coconut heads from the South, NASCAR. In the day, P.A. Sturtevant Company, they used to give out a trophy to the winning modified and sportsman crew chiefs. They made torque wrenches. It was a trophy with a torque wrench. Mm-hmm. Dickie Trabish was the only human who went to every race with Peter. Every show he went to all year. And Peter went through some people who just, go tuck it out. Dickie goes to Florida. He comes back. He said, I said, what's the matter? He said, I didn't even get a trophy. They stopped giving out a trophy. The guy went to probably 190 shows, God knows how many miles, and they couldn't even give him. He
just wanted that trophy.
That's all he wanted out of life. And you run into Dickie once in a while. He's still, oh, yeah. But Peter was a good guy. He really was. And very humble, very talented. But, the thing is, it was always not about him. And what can you say? Pete made it to the top. But he was always thankful for Eddie Flemke and all the people who helped him. Ray Stonkus was another guy, and Ray was there with Pete a lot. And Jack Malone had a garage, and next to it was a house. It was called Heartbreak Hotel, we called it. And that's where all the races, you needed a place to crash. That was it. And Butchie Walsh would crash there, and Pete and different people coming into town. And, Yeah, Jack finally ripped it down and built a new garage. But it was, it was a lot of interesting. And like one of my sad things is when Donnie McTavish got killed. We were best of friends, and that kid was going places. And talent. Mm-hmm. He grew up in Dover, Massachusetts, which is one of the richest towns, and probably a house that had 500 square feet. His parents were separated, this and that. Worked his tail off. Donnie, the year before he went chasing the championship, he was running in '65. He was running second to Charland, and he went to Lebanon Valley on an open show. There was nothing doing in NASCAR. So Merrill fined him. But the funny part, that's a great story. Donnie had that car painted in that permanent manganese, that ugly green stuff. And he would do. Merrill nailed him for running Lebanon. There's a big show the next day at Thompson. So it was a holiday weekend, I guess. Yeah, it had to be because it would be on a Monday. And Donnie gets back to the garage. He gets all the troops. Dick Jackson Jr., Dick Stewart, a whole bunch of people, the Walton brothers. They painted over the car with red paint. And they painted a 27 Junior, Dick Jackson's number. It's a Dick Jackson Construction. Dick Stewart and Bobby Walton leaded the car and striped the car. They show up at Thompson the next day. Merrill fined him because he ran under a phony name. Merrill fined Donnie as a car owner. And Donnie said, "What are you talking about? I don't own this car. This is Jackson's car. I don't own this. I got to run. I mean, you can't stop me from running. I don't, and stuff like that. Some of the stuff.
So is that because they were at a non-NASCAR
right?
event?
Lebanon was non-NASCAR, and that was later proven illegal because when you signed a NASCAR contract, you signed as an independent contractor, and you cannot tell them where to work. And there was a big standoff with Merrill and Norwood in late '69 before he threw out the modifieds that Merrill, there was Seekonk would always open up after Labor Day to open competition. And Merrill would get up there, "Now, fellas, you people, there's a non-sanctioned show down the street next week, and you're going to get fined if you go there." So about 25 cars go there. They show up to Norwood the next week. There's Merrill's list, boom, boom, boom. And so they said, okay, we're not going in. And they threatened the right to work laws. And Merrill did let them in, and that kind of ended that deal. But I could never understand why Richie Evans put up with it when they banned him, from running Fulton or wherever he ran. But that was an interesting time. But
so that was actually a time where you had to run NASCAR if you signed the sanction, the agreement at the beginning of the year.
But you also signed as an independent contractor.
Wow.
You can't tell an independent contractor where to work.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, but Mac was I got a letter in here I've never shown it to anyone. I got it about 3 days before he passed away. And he's had such a sense of humor, and you never saw anyone who charm the ladies like he could. It's like, you couldn't believe it. You'd go in a dating bar. What were they? Fathers 1, 2, and Kenmore Square. Inevitably, he was like a chick magnet. That's all you could say. And very, very. He had a Ford deal signed. A lot of people don't know that, and this wasn't to be. But he was very popular around here. People loved him, And I was lucky. I was near it. Al Feeney asked me if I would induct him to the Hall of Fame. I said, oh, boy. He says, well, you got to get a hold. His mother had passed away by then. I said, let me make some calls. So I cut a hold of his sister, Marsha, and she was down the Cape, and I'm going, oh, man, do I have to call her? I said, what am I going to say? So I called and I said, Marsha, this is a voice from your past. And she said, Bruce Cohen, how the heck are you? And we were talking. I said, Marsha, I got to run something by you. And I can understand if you turn it down, and that's cool. And I told her, we would like her and the kids to attend the induction ceremony at La Renaissance. She said, well, my sons are looking into their late uncle's career and stuff. We would love to go. I went, phew. So she showed up with the kids, and I had one of his jackets in the closet that I borrowed in '66 and kept it in good condition, all wrapped up and everything. And I was honored after I inducted him. I called his nephews up, and I gave them the jacket. And that was a very touching moment for me. And, and the crazy part about it, interesting part about it, George Caldwell was the crew chief, Big George, and he worked for Donnie and Cook, and he went down south, and for many years, he was Richard Petty's gas man. So we have this thing. Okay, I got a hold of Marcia. Thank God it was great. She showed up. I call up. I said, well, I'll call up Petty Enterprises. So I got the phone number from Bergie at the time, and I call up, hi, Petty Enterprises. Yeah, I'd like to speak to George Caldwell, please. Well, I start getting the third degree. Well, why do you want to speak to him? I said, it's because of my old friend of George's. I really got to speak to him. Well, wait a minute. I said, okay. They put me on hold. I'm going, what do I need the third degree from these people for? And about a minute later, she said, George is in the hospital with cancer. He will call you back in 5 minutes. I said, cool. That's great. So the phone rang, hang up, George. He said, yeah, I'm in the hospital. I told him the story. He says, I'll be there. If I have to crawl on my hands and knees, I'm going to get there with my wife and my son. I said, okay. That'd be great to see you, George, And to make one of my crazy long stories short, it was in February. The Pettys took their plane, and they were in Daytona practicing. They took a plane, one of their planes, and flew George, his wife, and son to Bradley. All the old crew showed up, except one. We won't mention who that is, but that doesn't matter. And George came to the I got pictures of it. George came to the ceremony. Everyone had tears in their eyes. And Petty's flew him back. This was on a Sunday. 4 days later, George passed away.
Wow.
Jeez.
And, I was not a Richard Petty fan. I was a Bobby Allison fan, but that's cool. Whatever. Petty's did a lot of this stuff. These are the untold stories of racing. I mean, during Daytona practice, warm-up sessions, they had their plane fly George and the family up and flew him back. And I sent a nice thank you note to Richard and Kyle Petty. I thought that was very cool. And, there's so many good unsung stories about
that's
that
racing.
stuff.
That's racing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
At all levels.
Yeah, and, most people don't know that story. But, and then you get people like Charland. Reenie, as the expression goes, Reenie was Reenie. Very good driver. A character. I'm still divided all these years later whether I liked him or not. And I saw him do some awful things. He was very nasty to Booker D. Jones. And Booker was one of the nicest people you'd ever want to meet. And I was ecstatic when he got in the Hall of Fame. I pushed for him, and Bonesy did a great job. And I used to say to Booker, I said, Booker, why did you just smack the guy, put him up in bars? Booker's hands were like this. He says, he's just an ignorant SOB, and it's not worth it. And so one night we're at Fonda, and Reenie ran very well there. And he was a card shark. They played every Tuesday night with Leo Maddie's place in West Springfield. Reenie would clean their clocks. And we're at Fonda one night, and he says, hey, call me my ethnicity. Get over here. I said, who do you want? So he says, draw high cards for $100. This was in 73, 74. $100 was $100 then. I said, okay. So he draws a 10. I drew a queen. I won. I said, so he's for 20. Double nothing. I said, look, let me tell you something, chump. I said, you clean out those guys every week in West Springfield. I said, I can go to my grave saying that I beat you at cards. I walked away. He was still babbling incoherently about an hour later. I would never play cards with him again. And then, there's a great place after Fonda called Anthony's Tavern. And everyone would go up there after the races. It was a lot of fun. And they had long family-type tables. So I'm opposite there. Maynard and Reenie are opposite me. A whole bunch of people there. So there's this young lady there, and he was giving her a hard time. Yeah, man, your hair's this. So she says, "Excuse me." So she goes to the bar, gets a pitcher of beer, comes back. Hey, you're not the champ. You're a chump. Pours it all over. It was fabulous. You know, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. But racing with Reenie was good. But you know, the sad part, a lot of his peers didn't like him, and his kids. Bernie was the apple of his eye. Bernie got killed in a house fire. One of the twins got killed in a stolen car. One died of natural causes, and the fourth son who was left, Lou and I would go to visit Reenie a couple times a year, and he'd go, or I go, we go together, whatever. And the fourth son said to the nursing home, when he dies, don't call me, throw the body in the dumpster. And I think that's a sad part of racing, but, you know.
That's tough.
But, you know, these guys were such characters. But he could drive a race car.
He's remembered as pretty good driver.
Yeah. But when we raced Fonda, that was a lot of fun, racing against the Kenny Shoemaker and those guys and Dave Lape.
And that kind of ties into what Lou and Dick kind of talked about with that time for the Sizzler. It was an era where you could run a dirt mod on asphalt and vice versa. Kind of let's start talking about kind of how the Sizzler even came, got started. You kind of touched on it, but from an idea you drew up in your living. I mean, on the way back from Waterbury.
It was in Waterbury from Middletown.
So what's your kind of the story goes that you kind of were kind of like the financier of this deal, I guess. I don't know if that's true or not.
No, somewhat, but no, we were all in it together, and we decided that we would use the money that we made from it for racing, which we did do.
And so, how does it start? You just start coming up with a plan, and you just said,
yeah, we had meetings. We had a lot of meetings with Bill Welch, with Bill Slater, and Zanardi and stuff, and we came up with a plan. 80 laps, quick, one race, 80 laps, that's it. And just promote the heck about it. And, like I said, there was so much free ink in the winter. And, I mean, let me ask you this, Paul. What papers show up at Stafford every week, if any?
Papers? There's none.
But at one time, look at all the papers that showed up. Kershaw, Charlie, the whole bunch of people. Yeah. That's all gone.
Now people don't even get the paper anymore.
And I'm talking about local papers, dailies and papers and city papers. Most papers today, if they get a feed, it's an AP feed.
Yeah.
And it's completely different. But we worked on it. We really worked hard at it. And, we had it all laid out what we're going to do, the 80 laps. And we put the good people in place. And
why Stafford? Why
because
Stafford?
Why not? Well, to be honest, like I said, we said, nah, Jacko, he'll never go for this, never in a million years. So we went to see Donald and Don Honig, he said, nope, not interested at all. So we said, all right, well, let's go to Stafford, we'll see what and your grandfather was on board with it.
What was the meeting like? Do you remember?
Oh, it was Jacko. He was a great guy. He was tough, but he was very, very fair. And, I would do a deal with him if I could, on handshake. And that's what it was on. There was no lawyers involved, nothing.
We actually pulled out the original lease.
You still have it.
I think the rent was like $1,000.
Yeah, and we had an option for the second year, and where we kind of blew it out of the water. The folks, Jack and everyone, wanted to take it over, and they made us an offer. So we said, cool. And that was it. And it's been in the Root family ever since. And I think it's great. I think the longevity is really in that it's going on 50 years. But I'm glad it's back to 80 laps.
It's 100, but
100. Okay, well, it's short.
We had to decide because we have our other four events that are those are all the 80 lappers, which all comes from the Sizzler.
I am very glad it's non-sanctioned, and that's cool.
Yeah, that got people excited, to say the least.
Yeah. I just don't know where that group is going. Back in the old days, if you had a problem, you could call Bob Saul. You could call Jim Hunter.
Yep.
Who do you call today?
Yeah, there's not many options. Yeah, it's an interesting time in the sport, and I think hearing these stories about, the Sizzler in the 70s is kind of interesting how it's similar to how it is now in a way, where there's a lot of groups kind of doing their own thing, but it's slowly starting to kind of consolidate back down. So it's very similar.
It's going to be more localized, like it was in the old days. And you had some great promoters, Harvey Tattersall at Riverside. And
we just talked about him on another episode.
Harvey was sharp. And the one thing I learned from Harvey was he'd say to me, we'd talk at length. I really liked the guy. And he used to say to me, you know something? I said, what? He said, a lot of racing people think, and promoters think, we're in the racing business. We're in the entertainment business. And people want to be entertained. Mm-hmm. And Harvey took care of his troops. You had a bad night if you weren't a Harvey's people. He took care of you to fix the car. And I liked he played the Waterbury bunch versus the New Haven bunch versus the Springfield bunch versus the Hartford bunch. And they were mostly Italians, and I'm not being racist or anything of that nature.
Polish.
Yeah. And he picked them against, can the Waterbury guys beat the West, guys? And he promoted the heck out of it. And it was a sad day for me when he left Riverside Park. I mean, not sad. It was sad. I don't think they improved anything, but Harvey was a showman, and he understood that. And another guy who understood that was Curly. Curly understood who he was, where he was, who his fans were, and who his drivers were. And I don't know. You look at today with the folks, the Coconuts, they don't have any racing people in charge, in my opinion. I mean, some of these tacks they've taken lately, you're going to be kidding me.
I plead the fifth on that one.
Oh, I know you. That's fine. That's fine. I'm not trying to draw you into anything. But it's just interesting that it's around here. It's like you just said, Paul. It's going back to, let's call it local racing or local sanctions. And I think it's interesting that they're running a race against you down in Norfolk. But
they moved it.
They moved it. That was a good move. That was a smart move to move it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they decided to move that. So, I mean, and we just announced that Doug Kobe just announced that's going to be the first event of his season, and he has 4 Sizzlers. The only guy who's got more is Ted Christopher, so he's going for his 5th.
I like Teddy Christo. No nonsense. Let's go. We're going to go win.
Yeah, he would drive anything, anywhere, anytime,
and do well.
Yes. So Lou and Dick talked a lot about how they were trying to fund their cars. They're driving.
So that's what we did.
Did you drive though?
No. No. And
so were you just a
didn't?
Mechanic, car owner? Car owner, okay.
And promoter of different things. Why I never drove. I had good peripheral vision, but I had a tempo. And I remember talking to like Eddie and Bugsy and those guys. What they felt made a good driver. Well, you got to have good vision, special peripheral vision on the side, and the ability to keep cool. And I did not have that. I finally got it at my old age, but I didn't have it then. And I was just more into how they went and just having a good time. And we did. We took the money and put it in race cars and stuff.
Who were some of your drivers then?
Lou and Dick. And
okay.
That was about it. As me as a car owner, but I'm one of the few people who say I had 2 Langhorne winners in my car at the same day. They had a veterans race or an old folks race up at Cairo, New York, and Bill Slater drove one car and Hully Bunn drove the other, and Hully won the race. So that was kind of cool. But I had a lot of fun racing Fonda. Fonda was a lot of fun.
You mentioned Bill Slater now several times. How instrumental was he in getting all this off the ground 50 years ago?
Bill, invaluable the way he did it, and Bill was Bill, and we loved the guy, but he was a key along with Bill Welch and Zanardi and Jack and people like that. Earl Grant on the flags, and Earl says that was the best race he ever flagged.
Really?
Yep. But Bill, like I said, was great at Norwood. He was great everywhere. I saw him winning the dirt at Stafford in Casella's car. And he starts one night 16th at Norwood. All the heroes are there. 9 laps, he's out front. I said, oh, man. So the guys from Needham, Greggy Mills, the 79 car, and Dave Welch, they finished second. So they protested Slater. And Earl Wilds, one of Slater's guys, comes up to me. He says, I'm telling you, this is the puppy mode. It's about 3:05. The good one's being refreshed. Yeah, okay. Greggy and Dave had a 370-inch stroker in their car. They finished second. They pulled Slater's, the V8 down, 3:06. I mean, Bill was very smooth, but Bill understood racing and racing people. He was one of them. And he was very instrumental. It's just one of these things. It was like a day in your life or something you worked at. It all came together. And that was really cool about that. It really was. It was a great day, and it's still a great day. You know, a classic. Freddie won it. Eddie was leading it and dropped out with a water pump failure. And, you know, a classic Fred DeSauer and Lenny's car won it. Yep. What can you say?
It's meant to be.
Yeah.
The bowler car was in victory lane, and they filed an entry for the 50th too. So the bowler car driver to be announced, but they have filed an entry, which I mean that's pretty cool. 50 years later.
Oh yeah, you know but think of this, Paul. How many people are still around?
Mm-hmm.
So many people have gone.
When we go down the list of the winners, there's not a lot from from back then.
No.
I mean, there's a lot from now that actually are going to compete and try and add to their total. But
that's great. Yeah. You know, Stafford's a great racetrack. I love Stafford. I like Thompson. Love Norwood.
And you mentioned you did some additional promoting. Did you do any other events, or was that it? Was it a one and done?
For me, it was one and done. Lou and Dick did the race, which is okay, but it wasn't the Sizzler. No, I'll be a one-hit wonder.
One-hit wonder.
What a hit!
He went out on top. 50 years later, it's still going.
Yeah.
What was that day like for you? Because I understand all three of you were in different kind of locations of the racetrack.
It was amazing. And it was like, please don't let it rain. Please don't let it rain. It was, threatening skies. And like I said before, when Earl went, I was in the infield jumping up and down. That we actually pulled this thing off. And the good thing was, like Jim Moffitt and a lot of other people, you guys are out of your mind. It's never going to work. And it did work, and it's still working, and that makes me feel good. You know, there's a lot to be said for longevity, and it's a lot to be said that Stafford's still going strong, and I think that's great. I mean, look at all the racetracks we've lost, but it's a milestone in my life, sort of like getting married and all that stuff. But racing, it was fun. It really was fun.
Who were some of your favorite, from that day at the Sizzler? There was, you mentioned it was almost 120 cars there. Who were some of the guys that, as promoters, you was kind of like, I'm excited that this guy's coming?
Roger Treichler was there. Don Diffendorf didn't run well, but, there's a story. I don't know if Dick and Lou mentioned it. We had the 40, the S360 in the car, which got a lot of flack, but that was okay. Diff showed up Saturday night, first in line, first entry, first in line. And he really wasn't the first entry, but we kind of engineered that. And he had probably walking pneumonia. And he was just so sick, he shouldn't have even come. But he said, look, I feel obligated to come. And he did. He didn't qualify, but he showed up. And Richie was not there, but Richie went to Fulton. But, all the other people.
Richie was not there?
No.
Huh.
No.
That's interesting.
And we can't figure out if Bo Diddley was there, if Bo Dine was there. I don't think so. I don't remember him being there.
We had the program. We were just looking at the program the other day. I don't remember him being on the entry list.
No, I don't either. Because somebody, Tom Schmay, one of the great racing historians, asked me that. And I said, I don't think so.
If he was, he might have been in his own car.
Yeah. But, they all showed up. And we had a small block bonus. And I think Dick Watson won it. And like I said, we had a lot of giveaways and stuff. It was just a great day. It was a great day for racing fans.
Yeah.
It was just like it was a great day for New England fans when Pete Hamilton won the Daytona 500. And it was like, wow, we actually did it.
Why not do another event? Was it just, it wasn't always like, I don't, or was it too much and you're like, this isn't for me?
I think we've talked about doing something over the years. I don't think the timing was right. And now that what you mentioned, Paul, with more, let's say, non-NASCAR races, I think you could do it now. Because there's not one group says you can't, what I mean? There's not one dominant group. There's a bunch of them. And I think what you guys, I'm really pleased that you're doing it and the way you're doing it. And I think that's cool.
The winner has a shot at over $30,000 to win.
Yep.
That's no joke.
No. But I still remember sleeping on the floor with your uncle. I think it was like $12,500 at the time, which was a good purse.
Yeah.
And the last spot in the feature was $500.
It's pretty good.
Which was a good payoff in those days.
So the Sizzler goes on. You get your, the proceeds. You continue to race the car owner.
Oh yeah.
How long do you stay in the sport for? Because
I was involved till the late '90s.
And then you just decided it wasn't time to call it.
Yeah. Lou decided to hang it up. He had some couple health issues. It was just time.
Do you miss it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we raced a lot of Fonda was just unbelievably fun. And we used to go to Kane, and that was a lot of fun too. And so, the cards just, the stars didn't align anymore to do it. So we just stopped doing it.
Well, we'll be glad to have you back at the 50th with the original trio.
Yeah. But, racing has been a lot of fun. As we've said, it certainly has changed.
Yes, it has.
I don't know how these kids can get going today. It's if I were going to promote today, I've thought about this. I would probably go to a small track.
Yeah, it's important.
And I would have what we would call a junk show. Have 100 cars on the track, rock and roll, have the starting line, the finish line in the middle of the backstretch, and just let them thrash and bash.
Like an enduro.
Yeah. I think that could work.
Yeah, the tough part about that on a big track.
Yeah. You're going too fast.
Yeah. It's the good thing that kind of at Stafford that we have going now is we have a great go-kart program which feeds our SK lights and the SKs and then eventually the modified. So we have this little ladder where the average age in the pits now is probably 20s. It's great.
Well, so many sports, and I don't care whether it's golf or this, baseball or that. How do you get the younger fans?
Yeah.
Got
to have the young drivers.
Yeah, and I went to Norwood. I sat in the stands. I was like, couldn't believe it. And I was hooked.
Yeah.
Another thing in racing, which is interesting, and a friend of mine brought it up to me. He took his grandson to Seekonk. And he says, how can you tell? There's so many divisions. And you go to this track has this group, that has that group, this has this group. There's should be sort of a uniformity. So, and another thing, there's a track, and some tracks used to do it. If you're a new fan, give them a handout. This is what we do. This is how it works. And another thing, I know Stafford always has realized this. One of the keys to me is your announcer. Because your announcer is sort of between management and the fans. And that was very, very important.
Arguably the most important part of the entire show because they're the person who has to kind of tell Joe Schmo, who's never been here before, what the heck's going on? Because, well, why do these cars have tires that don't stick out?
Yeah, and they don't know. And it's a learning process. It really is.
Well, Bruce, this has been amazing.
I hope I didn't bore you, but
no. I think our listeners are gonna love that. There's a bunch of stories that have never been told before.
I can't believe we've done an hour already.
That's what I was gonna say.
But no, I would say I've had a lot of fun.
Yep,
a lot of great moments. There've been some sad moments, but overall, I wouldn't trade it for any amount of money in the world. And I sincerely mean that. The friends you make, and are we all? Can I tell you one about Bugsy?
Oh, we love a good Bugsy
It's
story.
sort of rated X, but Bugsy's been calling me mother.
I mean, of course.
Bugsy's been calling me mother since 1965.
Okay.
And every Mother's Day, I call him up, and I say, you, blankety blank, another Mother's Day goes by. You've been calling me mother. It's Mother's Day. No card, no flowers, no candy, nothing. Slam the phone down. Then he calls me back. 5 minutes later, we shoot the breeze. My wife and I are out visiting my daughter in Park City, Utah, ski capital of the world. And we stayed in this great B&B right down the street from her house. And it was a former brothel. But so we check in. The next day we're having breakfast. Oh, we check in, and the person who runs it says, where are you from? I said, well, Somerville, where are you from? She said, Westport, Massachusetts. I said, being the wise guy I can be, I said, well, you must know Westport's 2 leading citizens. She said, who might they be? I said, Deke and Freddie Estelle. She starts jumping up and down, yelling and screaming. Oh, yeah, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. He said, I grew up with their kids. She said, did you know George Martin? I said, well, I knew George Martin. He passed away last around Christmas. She said, well, that was my father. And the next day, she said, did you know Bugsy? So I had to tell her my Bugsy story. She said, yeah, I know Bugsy. The next day, I would come down for breakfast. She said, I had a friend of mine, a friend of yours of mine, who called from Massachusetts last night and kind of gave you the finger over the phone. I said, really? I said, who was that? She said, Stevie Grant, Earl Grant's son. So it's a small world. You're 2,200 miles from your house, and you run into racing people. And that's kind of cool. Linda and I were on a cruise, the old Scotia Prince going to Nova Scotia. And I hear, Bruce, how the heck are you? It was Jimmy Martell and his wife, Bob, and Bobby Fences and his ex-wife now. So you run into race people, but they've been fun people, and for a fat little Jewish kid it's been a great odyssey. It's been a lot of fun, and I'll tell you a quick Eddie story. I was, believe it or not, New Britain in business. And I said, well, I got to go to Eddie's shop. So I go to Eddie's shop. We're having a coffee. Paula calls up. She said, Dad, I got to tell you something. He said, what? Ronnie and I just got married at City Hall. I'm like, yeah. But, it's stories like, you can't make this stuff up, and Eddie was a great guy. All the people he mentored, he should be Hall of Fame worthy. But it's been a lot of fun. It really has.
Do you have a Bill Welch story?
Yeah, like when Bill said I could have been a great announcer if I could keep my mouth shut. Yeah, Billy lived right down the street. Yeah, great guy. And Bill was a jack of all trades. He could announce. He was handicapped. He was a very bright guy. And he dated a woman for 100 years and never got married, Shirley. She scored at Stafford, Shirley Jackman. And Shirley was on Candlepins for Cash about 12 weeks in a row. She was a great bowler. But Bill would tell me off when I needed to be told off. And he had no hesitation about calling me up or seeing me and doing it. And I was very glad Welchie got in the first Hall of Fame class with Near. And, Westboro was a great track. And I'm very, very friendly with the Falcone brothers. And they had the world's greatest beer stand. That beer stand supported the racetrack. And Welchie always was afterwards. We would always have some beers afterwards. He was just a great guy. And, it was a different era. Today, everyone's got to be professional. And I used to argue with your uncle about that, too. Not your grandfather, your uncle. And I say, Jackie, if you want, I'll be the most professional person you see. Pay me $800 to finish last in the feature so I can live off the race car. But that was just a difference of philosophy. And, we're fine. But it's changed. It's different. And, you either accept the difference or not. Mm-hmm. And I've accepted it. I think some of the folks down south have made. I once asked Berge, okay, this is interesting. I said to him, why is NASCAR successful? And he thought about it a minute or two. He said, good decisions. And I think you could say the opposite now. But another thing, I'll tell you a quick Max story. He was responsible for a couple NASCAR rule changes. No, you got to have numbers, and you can't have nasty slogans in the back, which he had.
To be fair.
Yeah. He actually stopped in at the factory that made Trojans looking for sponsorship. But
I mean,
hey, do what you got to do.
absolutely.
yeah, and the old crew, we speak to each other now and then. It's pretty cool, but racing is fun. You get to meet a lot of great people.
It's always a common occurrence on this podcast. It's all the stories are endless. That's why the podcast exists. That's why we have this.
And when we go and other people go, the stories are going to be gone.
Yeah, that's why we're telling them now.
Yeah, and I think you guys do a great job. I love this podcasting stuff. You could pick a guy. You got stories for all of them.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple good rated X stories for Fats, but we can't get into that on the air. But it was just a different era. And if you think about the pioneers and like Red Cummings and then Leo and those guys in the 60s and 70s, they were a different breed. A lot of them were. It fit into the matrix in that a lot of them served in World War II. Mm-hmm. They came back. They were young, full of testosterone, and they had some bucks in their pocket. You could buy a junk car and go racing, and it's evolved from there. Yeah, it really has.
Well, we're looking forward to having the trio at the 50th, and you'll be the grand marshals. Talk to some of the fans. Hopefully, tell some more stories to all the fans that are there. And I know everyone appreciates it, and looking forward to it.
Well, thank you guys, and it's been great, and it's been a great odyssey. And I always say this: I was very fortunate to grow up when and where I did, and that I think that was the key.